so many men and women that I know from all over the world have gotten in touch with me about this one comment, which is, again, I would urge people, please, 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 to watch this in context. Please watch the whole interview, or watch at least that part of the conversation, because it really wasn't about, the boys weren't sort of like debunking anything that I was saying. But at the same time, it's sort of, it felt very similar to like when I'm at dinner with a bunch of my friends, and I will always make the point that, you know, well, this is actually an experience that we go through every single day, 100% of the time. And Paul, being one of my very dear friends, I've had conversations like that with him before, and he completely gets that and completely understands that. But I think the fact that there was a moment like that happened on a show like Graham Norton, which is something that the entire nation tunes in to watch, and even overseas it's something that people tune into. It seems to have had an accessibility which seems to have really gained traction, which I think is amazing, you know.
Virgin Radio.
Oh, today's guest, she's a big star and a beautiful human being. She is, well, her breakout role was in Atonement. I will talk about that for a minute. And she has been in such beautiful films like Lady Bird and Little Women and The French Dispatch, and more Academy Award nominations than I care to remember. She's won heaps of awards, of course she has. Her new film Blitz is beautiful, historically and aesthetically. I got to see it, and she's terrific in it. She's too young to be an icon, but she is one anyway. Saoirse Ronan, good morning and welcome. How lovely to talk to you again.
It's lovely to see you.
How are you today?
I'm good. I can see you, but you can't see me, which I'm really enjoying.
Well, do you know, that's a great injustice. It should be the other way around. But here we have to. Do you remember well, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember the first time we talked in a radio studio was, I think you must have been, 12 or 13? How old were you for Atonement?
I think I was 13 when we were doing press. And you were one of the first interviews.
And were you freaked out by all of that, or were you into it?
I was neither, I think. The differences between now and then is that there just wasn't nearly as much pressure being put on a young actor like myself to sell a movie. I'm sure it would have been different if it was like the Harry Potter kids and, you know, big sort of like franchise children films, but I wasn't involved in any of that kind of stuff. I was in movies with like Keira Knightley and Catherine Zeta-Jones and people like that, so they cared more obviously about the stars than they did talking to a kid. So there wasn't really that much required of me when I was younger.
Yeah, and it's funny. Rick Astley of Never Gonna Give You Up fame was saying recently that if he knew what fame would be like as such a young lad when he was starting off, he said they should always put a clause in young actors' contracts to say that they should have access to therapy from the get-go. Would you agree with that? That sense of being the need to mind?
Yes, I completely agree with that. But I also think that it's our responsibility as a society, as a culture, to reduce the amount of expectation that we put on anyone who's in the public eye. I think there's just too much that's expected of us. We're too sort of like exposed at all points. And there's this ridiculous argument that people will make, which is like, well, this is what you signed up for. This is why you're doing it, which is nonsense. I don't think anybody, especially if you're an artist, if you're an actor or a musician or, you know, anyone like that, that is not the reason why you're getting into this. You're getting into it for the process of actually making the thing. And I think from seeing Elliott, who's in Blitz, which is a film now, he'd never been in a movie before, and that kid just loved being on that movie set. He loved working with the crew, he loved working with the other actors, and it was very much about the process. And it was always the same for me, and I feel very lucky that I was coming up in a time where actually it was reflective of the work that I was doing, but my relationship to the work was so protected and it was so sacred. And when I wasn't on set, I was very much kind of in another world. I was in County Carlow in Ireland where nobody was involved in the industry at all. So there was a really kind of healthy separation between the two. So
important. Let's talk about young Elliott Heffernan. Wow, he's kind of child star, if you want to call it that, of your movie Blitz, which is a World War II film. I don't know if I said this to you after the event, but when I went to see it, I came away from it seeing London and to an extent the UK, and certainly hit the World War II experience very differently. I saw tube stations differently. Talk to us about the film and give us the pitch if you like.
Well, this is it. I mean, the film is written and directed by Steve McQueen,
Yeah.
and it's set during 3 days of the Blitz. The Blitz went on for about 8 or 9 months in total, but this is set over 3 days. And to put it simply, it follows a young boy who has been evacuated by his mother to the countryside. And while he's on the way there, he jumps off of the train and sets out to head back to London to see his mother again, to reunite with her.
Yeah.
And eventually, my character, who is his mother, Rita, realizes that he hasn't made it to his final destination, and it's about the two of us coming back together. But you're watching the London that we all know, the London that we recognize,
Yeah.
that feels so much more sort of ground in reality, but really is not a version of this city that you see very often, certainly when it's set during the Second World War.
Precisely, and the place was aflame. I mean, that opening scene with the fire hose out of control like a lunatic serpent, and they're trying to get the flames out, and the harbour and the refuge that the tube stations became for people, because obviously they were under the ground, but they were horrible circumstances in which to be there, all families, and there was a kind of seemed to be a political row about that, and then the community and the goodness of people, and you know, in the middle of this horrible situation, and there you are, you know, a mum. I mean, we began our chat talking about you being, you know, Brian E. Tallis in as a 12-year-old in Atonement. Now here you are in a Stephen McQueen film playing the mother, which must come as a, I'm sure, a bit of a shock to you. But it's
Weird for you.
Yeah.
It must be weird for you because you've known me since I was 12.
Seriously, it was a deeply unpleasant experience for me to feel so old. And I really regret that you made this film. But no, it was really lovely. The performances all around are beautiful, and I just think it's an episode of history that I love to see on. And I'm going to say this and ask you about this on the big screen. I know this is going to be on Apple TV from November 22nd, but it's in cinemas as of and from tomorrow. This has to, because it's Steve McQueen and the likes of yourself in there, it has to be seen on a cinema screen, on the big screen. I'd urge people to see it that way, because it really is quite, I call it a brutally beautiful film.
Yes, absolutely. Visually, it is so epic, and I understand that, for anyone who's not in the film industry, I know they will hear us say that a lot. But what they have to remember is that we are making these movies to be presented in a certain way. Certainly, when they're premiered to the world at first. And one of the things that I've actually been discussing a lot is not only visually how much you gain from that experience, or what you gain from the from the visuals, but also the sort of unity that you get with strangers when you go into a cinema and you're there for a shared experience. That's incredibly special. And I think with something like this, it is ultimately honoring and celebrating the human spirit and how that can endure anything. And so I think to share that with other people from your city, no matter where you are, is quite beautiful. So even just for that experience alone, I think it's worth going to the movie theatre to go and see it.
You're a very worldly person in what I know of you, and a very empathetic person. And I think you'll understand when I say that, as somebody who's never been in a war zone myself. I don't know if you have been or not. I suspect maybe not. But in a world we live in as a generation, if I can share that, we've got Ukraine and we've got Gaza and so on. The horror of war, regardless of whether it was World War II or whether it's happening across the world as we speak. All these films, they kind of matter because they kind of jolt you into kind of good God, what are people going through? What are children going through? It is a reminder.
It is a reminder, and I think that the difference between seeing it on your TV screens in a news segment or scrolling through it briefly on your phone is that you are, as a member of the human race, committing yourself to enduring it just for 2 hours, which so many people across the world do not have the luxury of doing.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
somehow being able to stand in solidarity with them and have some sort of empathy, which is just in our human nature. By coming into this collective space, we are doing all that we sort of can by just trying to empathize, trying to understand. I know that, like, when we were making Blitz, it was a very surreal experience to essentially film a scene in a war zone in a city that I know incredibly well, and then to wrap at the end of the day, get into my car, drive home, put the radio on, and I was hearing exactly the same stuff happening
Yeah.
in real time.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's kind of our responsibility as humans to force ourselves actually to immerse ourselves in that, even if it's just for a short time.
Saoirse, you're in all the papers today, from the Sun to the Guardian to the Telegraph to the Times, because of the Graham Norton Show on Friday night. To remind people, you were there with Paul Mescal, who's a lovely fella, as you well know, and Denzel Washington and Eddie Redmayne. And as they were chatting about being attacked by a phone, using a phone, you tried to get in a couple of times and eventually did get in, and you said, this women are afraid of being attacked all the time. Tell me a little bit about that and saying that and the reaction to it.
The reaction has been wild. It's definitely not something that I had expected, and I didn't necessarily set out to sort of make a splash. But I do think there's something really telling about the society that we're in right now and about how open women want to be with the men in their lives about their experience. That so many men and women that I know from all over the world have gotten in touch with me about this one comment, which is, again, I would urge people, please, 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 to watch this in context. Please watch the whole interview, or watch at least that part of the conversation, because it really wasn't about, the boys weren't sort of like debunking anything that I was saying. But at the same time, it's sort of, it felt very similar to like when I'm at dinner with a bunch of my friends, and I will always make the point that, well, this is actually an experience that we go through every single day, 100% of the time. And Paul, being one of my very dear friends, I've had conversations like that with him before, and he completely gets that and completely understands that. But I think the fact that there was a moment like that happened on a show like Graham Norton, which is something that the entire nation tunes in to watch, and even overseas, it's something that people tune into. It seems to have had an accessibility which seems to have really gained traction, which I think is amazing. It's opening a conversation, and again, hopefully it's allowing more and more women to just be like, well, yeah, actually, let's talk about our experience. Like, I met a woman last night who's working on Blitz, and she said that it was really interesting. After we watched that interview, myself and a few of my female friends were with my husband, and we said, oh, this really reminds me of the fake phone call. And her husband went, what fake phone call? What do you mean? And of course you wouldn't understand.
Yes.
You never have to go through anything like that. But she somehow throughout her life as a female has gained these tools without ever talking to other women about it, and understanding that this is sort of a survival tactic. And we've all sort of like subconsciously found the same tools and used them again and again. And I find that really interesting.
I loved it. I loved it because it meant it gave men an insight that they mightn't have got if they didn't know already, and I thought it was great. I'm delighted you did that, so thank you, and I'm delighted with the reaction to it because it's important too. Okay, last thing before we go is congratulations on getting married to Jack. I'm so happy for you both. I don't know Jack, but I know you, and I'm just so happy. How are you? How's married life working for you? Are you loving it? Has it changed you, or is it just here we go again in life?
Yeah, here we go again. We've been together a long time, and we've had a really busy year with work, and we have The Outrun out as well, which is a movie that we produced together, and that's kind of our baby right now. So we're putting a lot of time and our energy into that, and we're incredibly proud and excited about the reception that's gotten. That's still in the cinemas now as well for anyone who wants to go and see it. Again, I would really urge anyone to take the time out to go and see it in the cinema. But yeah, we're doing great. He's doing the washing right now.
Good man. You have him where you need him. I mean, between Slow Horses and The Outrun and Blitz, I'm nearly saying I'm sick of the society. I'm not. I could never be. But I'm delighted for the pair of you, and particularly for you, Saoirse. I look forward to seeing you very, very soon. You're a dote, and you're brilliant at what you do, and you do important work too. So thanks for everything. Sending you all the love.
Thanks, Ryan.
See you soon.